Welcome to episode 5. Welcome to episode 5. Hold on. Hey guys. Hello. I missed you. I hope that you've been surviving quarantine and that you guys have been staying healthy, safe, that your families are healthy and safe. Hopefully we're nearing the end of this, but who knows. So also, I was so happy to see this week how many people had viewed the series so far. It was just so cool to see over 1,000 views on my introduction video. Just the idea that 1,000 people saw these videos, or even just that one person watched it 1,000 times. I don't care which one it is, but just that it's helpful and making a difference for someone has been so cool to see. And your comments and your feedback have been amazing. I feel like I'm really getting to connect with you guys on another level, and I just love that. These are conversations that I have with my clients one-on-one all the time, and these videos are really allowing me to bring my expertise to thousands of people. And it's just so cool, honestly. You can always reach out to me at any time. So follow me on Instagram. Please subscribe to the series if you're interested in seeing new content. And I'll provide my email address so you can always reach out to me with any questions that you have at any time. Okay, welcome to episode 5. Welcome to episode 5. This is just amazing that we're 5 episodes in already, and we've been scratching the surface. We've been scratching. We haven't gone too deep into anything. I know it feels like there's been a lot of information, but if I was to show you the outline for this entire series that I have built out, you would freak. There's so much more coming. This is literally just scratching the surface. This video in particular, we're talking about the property purchase process. Included in each of the steps of the property purchase process are a lot of different principles that we are gonna delve more deeply into in upcoming videos. So just keep in mind that after going over the mortgage step or the real estate agent step or the board application step, just know that you're going to have more questions, and this is not the comprehensive review of that step. Every single one of those steps is going to be gone into in great detail in upcoming videos. This is simply overview of the property purchase process. I feel like this is a really helpful video. This is the #1 question that I get on all of my preliminary phone calls and in-person meetings that I have with my clients. So I know that this is something that everybody wants to know. Let's dive in, and I'm flipping my notes. Let's get into it. So for a brief overview of the property purchase process, there are a few steps that are of course critical, and just keep in mind that depending on the property purchase type, whether you're buying a condo, a co-op, or a private townhouse, the steps will differ a little bit. And the final property type that exists is a sponsor unit, and there's going to be a whole nother video about sponsor units because those property purchase steps are a little bit different. Keep in mind that this is a general overview. The basic steps of the purchase process are identifying the property, making an offer, coming to a meeting of the minds, signing your contract, doing the board application, getting the board approval. If it's a co-op, you'll have your interview, and then finally getting your closing date on the calendar and getting to the closing table where you get your keys and the apartment's yours. That is the full purchase process. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Have a nice day. Just kidding, I'm gonna talk for another probably 30 minutes. So I'm going to tell you all of the little details in each of those steps now. First, if you want the property purchase process to be fun and not grueling, then you want to build your team. You really want to assemble your team. You want to pick people who are going to set you up for success. Your team is made up of your real estate agent, your real estate attorney, and your mortgage lender. These are the 3 most critical people who are going to really ultimately determine whether you're going to have a positive or a negative experience in the purchase process. Either way, you'll likely get to the closing table, though I have seen issues arise that completely destroy deals. If you have a team behind you where each party is in communication with each other, providing updates back and forth, really working together as your team to make sure that all issues are brought up and addressed and solved, and everyone's working in a timely fashion and prioritizing your transaction, the purchase process feels like a walk in the park. If you do not have the right team, then you are going to experience unnecessary issues, delays, different things can come up, and I've seen them happen that will make the deal and the transaction more difficult than it has to be, and will also put the deal in jeopardy. So there are reasons why you might want a deal to fall through. Maybe the property isn't what you thought it was. Maybe you don't like it. Those are perfectly fine reasons for a deal to fall through. But having a deal fall through because a lender wasn't communicative, or your attorney didn't properly inform you of something that's really important, or didn't make the right impression with the seller's attorney and turn the seller off for some reason. These are all things I've seen happen that makes the purchase process feel like you've literally been through a war. Feeling like you've been through a war, or feeling like you had a walk in the park. I mean, I would pick a walk in the park any day. So you really just want to make sure that you have the right people with you and the right people working for you. This entire video is going to be framed pretty much from the point of view of a buyer. Given that we're reviewing the property purchase process, I'm assuming that anyone watching this video in particular is likely trying to learn about purchasing, buying, so you are the buyer. So I'm gonna go through all of these steps in the point of view of the buyer. So when I refer to you, I'm referring to the buyer or the purchaser. If you're watching this video from the seller's point of view, that's totally fine, but just keep that in mind so you don't get confused as to like, who am I talking about? Choosing your real estate agent is of course very important. Your real estate agent is an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to being your project manager on the deal. There are a ton of moving parts in the purchase process. There are also like hundreds of pieces of paper that need to be signed and different things that are happening at any given moment. They're taking care of all of the time-consuming nonsense that you'd rather not have to be bothered with so that you can live your life. When it comes to the attorney and the mortgage lender, real estate agents work with dozens and dozens of lenders and real estate attorneys every single day on all of their transactions that they work on. They've seen amazing ones and they've seen awful ones. When they work with great ones, we keep their information so that when we work with clients who are looking to purchase properties, we can make recommendations for attorneys and lenders that the buyer might really like working with. And my advice is to really have an open and honest relationship with your real estate agent, as long as they're a good one, is truly trying to work in your best interest, making sure that you're totally protected in the deal, and really putting the puzzle pieces together for you to make sure that it's painless. So given that you trust your real estate agent, if they make a recommendation to you with a list of referrals that they might think you'd like for lenders and attorneys, I highly recommend you speak with those people and choose to work with your favorite. Those people will often prioritize you and do the absolute most impeccable job for you. They definitely don't want anything to fall through the cracks. Once you've identified who you want to work with, who you want to get your mortgage with, if you are getting a mortgage, really the first big step in the purchase process is getting pre-approved. You really want to know and identify what your budget is so that you can go shopping for things that fit your budget. An important thing to note is that if you don't have a pre-approval letter from a bank, which means that you're pre-approved for a mortgage, then you actually can't place offers on any properties that you like. Properties come and go on and off the market every single day. Properties become available and properties get taken. The market changes kind of on like a month-to-month basis. Pricing in April is going to be different than pricing in May. The situation and demand and supply, everything changes month to month. What you saw a few months ago is also not going to be the same as what the market is when you're ready to actually place offers. So I always recommend go out looking when you're ready to place offers. You can, educate yourself on listings online. That's totally fine. But as far as going out and viewing properties, usually you want to do that when you're ready and in the market for the property, because educating yourself on the market at one moment in time is not really going to be that useful when you decide that you're serious like 6 months down the line. But when you're ready, you get your pre-approval letter. Something interesting to keep in mind about the mortgage pre-approval is that the bank is really looking at your pre-approval from the point of view of a monthly expense. So they're looking at the expenses that you can afford to pay on the apartment in relation to the income that you make each month. A lot of people look at the sticker price on an apartment, the sticker price being the asking price, but really the asking price doesn't make all of the difference in how much that apartment costs each month. I mentioned in my last episode, condos and co-ops have maintenance fees and property tax fees, which greatly vary from building to building. So a property price at $600,000 in one building might cost you $4,000 a month because maybe the monthly taxes and monthly maintenance are not high. And in a different building, a $600,000 apartment might cost you $8,000 a month because the property taxes and the maintenance are very high. So that is something to keep in mind when you are getting your mortgage. They are approving you for a monthly payment more than they are approving you just for a purchase price. The process to get pre-approved is pretty easy. You speak to the lender and you provide them with the documents that they need. Usually it's tax returns, probably pay stubs, just to make sure that the income that you're claiming that you make is the income that you actually make. Within a business day or two, usually a lender can turn around for you a pre-approval letter. Once you have the pre-approval letter, you can go ahead and make offers on any property that you want. Sellers are going to actually take you seriously and they're actually going to engage with you. There are 3 different types of letters that you can get from a bank. One is the very most preliminary. It's the pre-qualification letter. This letter doesn't mean anything. So if you have a pre-qualification letter from your bank, what you want is to go through whatever the couple of further steps are to actually get a pre-approval letter. A seller is not going to take a pre-qualification letter seriously. All a pre-qualification letter is you may have had a very elementary conversation with a lender and the lender asks what your income is and what your basic expenses are, and you told them that information, and based on that information, assuming that everything you said was true, they will provide you with a pre-qualification letter giving you a very rough estimate of the amount of money that you could afford to pay each month. The reason why that holds no water with sellers is because in order to get a pre-qualification letter, you do not have to have your credit run, and there was no verification of any of the income that you stated is true. So no seller is really going to take a qualification letter and think that you're qualified. What you really need is the pre-approval letter. In order to get the pre-approval letter, your credit is run, and you also provide those basic documents that I mentioned, like the tax return and the pay stubs, to show that the income that you're claiming that you make is actually what you make, and that your credit score is satisfactory for the bank to actually give you that mortgage. The pre-approval letter is really the first solid document that you could take to a seller and be taken seriously. The third type of letter that you can get from the bank, and it really isn't all that common, but it can help you in certain scenarios, is a pre-commitment letter. Is the bank stating that they didn't just look into you, but you also provided the bank with the address of the building that you're interested in, and the bank is able to look into the building and confirm that that building will not be an issue to lend in, or that building won't be an issue to grant a mortgage in, and therefore they give you a pre-commitment letter, which is the closest thing that you can get to an actual mortgage commitment, the official thumbs up from the bank saying that they are going to give you the mortgage. That's something that you can ask your real estate agent for more information about, or your loan officer for more information about, and really determine if you need it or if your bank will even give it to you, because not all banks give pre-commitment letters. Once you feel ready that you want to go out and start looking at properties, you want to link up with a buyer's agent that specializes in the areas that you are interested in looking in. You really don't want to compromise your negotiation leverage, so right from the beginning, you want to be visiting properties with your buyer's agent. Your buyer's agent should have a really good grasp on what you like, what you don't like, so that they can be putting properties in front of you that actually will work for you. And ultimately, when you get to the offer phase, that buyer's agent is going to really fight for your best interest, fighting to get that property for the lowest possible price, and fighting to get the terms of the deal to break in your favor. The other interesting thing to note is that a lot of websites now that aggregate listings for consumers, whether it be Zillow, StreetEasy, Realtor, all of these websites also will attempt to link you up with a buyer's agent who's qualified in the area that you're looking in. So it's not all that easy for someone working without an agent to inquire on a listing online and get through directly to the seller to schedule that appointment. Very, very often you are going to be put in touch with a buyer's agent because in New York City, they aren't encouraging all buyers to work with a buyer's agent. So if you are a buyer inquiring on a listing, you're probably going to be getting through to a buyer's agent. So if that's going to happen either way, as might as well you just from the beginning choose the person that you want to work with carefully and make sure that you trust them. Additionally, it's also a really nice plus if your buyer's agent has a certification in negotiation. There is a title called a certified negotiation specialist that requires going to additional classes and actually learning really useful principles on negotiating and how to ultimately get what you need in a negotiation in a way that keeps the seller and the buyer on good terms and ultimately fosters a successful deal. So if your buyer's agent has that certification, that's also really, really great to have. You really want to be working with someone that's going to fight for you, communicating every single day. You're talking on the phone, you're texting. You want someone that you can talk openly to, that you're comfortable with, who you genuinely like. Who do you like being around? Who do you like talking to? Who doesn't annoy you? And really who you can see yourself working with. Now you're ready to start looking for properties. This is the fun part. It's probably the only fun part, honestly, out of the property purchase process. The timing on this one is completely up to you. You can look at properties for a day, you can look at properties for a year. I have clients that I've been working with for over a year looking for properties, and I have clients that find the property of their dreams in our first outing. There are some things that are very important to keep in mind when you are looking for a property. The first few properties that you see are going to be kind of eye-openers for you. You're going to find yourself saying things like, I had no idea that 800 square feet was way too small for me. I definitely want something that's at least 900 or 950 square feet. There are certain things that you won't know until you start looking. Maybe you didn't realize that you hated parquet floors and that you specifically only want hardwood. These are things that make total sense. As you look, you will refine your taste. However, there are certain things that you do want to make sure you have clearly written out for yourself as far as what you're looking for. Because if you don't, you'll find that you're going in circles and looking at way too many places that aren't the right fit, and you're just exhausting your own time in a non-productive way. Do you have a pet? Do you need a property that's pet friendly? Do you prefer to live on a high floor? Do you care about view? Do you care about light? Do you care about size? Do you need private outdoor space? Do you want something with a terrace, or do you not want something with a terrace? These are things that you want to identify, and you want to prioritize them. You want to compare each apartment that you see against your list of criteria. This is just something that I find that's so interesting that I explain to my clients. Let's say you look at 10 properties. You'll notice that some apartments have some pros and some cons. Another apartment will have a different pro and different cons, but they all have pros and cons. If you were to assign a point system to every feature in an apartment, you'll notice that all of the apartments within a certain budget, within a certain neighborhood, pretty much will have the same number of points, but they're different. It's very rare that within a certain budget, unless you're a multi-millionaire billionaire and you don't have a budget, it's not common that you find an apartment that has no cons. That's something to always expect going into it. What is the prioritization of those features that you love the most and love the least? That will make it much more easy for you to scratch places that aren't going to do it. And when you do find a place that checks most of your boxes, you'll feel amazing about it. Very, very often I will take clients out for showings and we will find their ideal apartment within the first or second outing that we have. And it's very common. They often ask me, like, should we actually proceed with this apartment? We haven't been looking that long. And the truth is that a majority of the time you do find the ideal apartment in the beginning. The worst thing is letting it slip through your fingers and feeling like you want to leave no stone unturned, and you end up looking at a bunch of other properties that don't work as well, and when you end up going back to the first one, it's no longer available. And that's like terrible. I hate when that happens. It's so sad when that happens, but really, it never hurts to start placing an offer and getting into the negotiation conversation on a property that you love while you're still looking at other properties. Nothing's binding until you sign a contract. So that brings us to the next step, making an offer. You are at the offer and negotiation stage of the purchase process. This stage of the process takes usually a couple of business days. So what I like to remind my clients is you can make offers on any properties that you like. Making an offer is not binding. Nothing is binding until you have a fully executed contract, and we will get to that. It's totally reasonable for you to place an offer and continue looking for plan Bs and plan Cs. Negotiation does not only involve the asking price. A strong negotiation involves all terms of the deal. Things that can be negotiated are closing time frame, different contingencies that you can choose to have or omit, how much you're going to put down in cash versus how much you're going to finance, or are you paying all cash, closing credits, work to be done in the apartment, taxes and fees. There are so many ways that you can make your offer more compelling. This is when your buyer's agent's job really kicks in. So once you guys identify the property that you want to start pursuing, your buyer's agent is going to run comps for you, show you all of the recent sales of similar apartments in the building, in the neighborhood, and really identify what a good starting point should be so that ultimately the goal is to net out at a price that is fair and a good deal for what you're looking for. Your buyer's agent at this stage is really gonna fight for you, and they're gonna be honest with you because some properties are more negotiable than others. And they're gonna be very clear with you on what's really worth pursuing and what isn't. I'm going to have an upcoming episode soon that is going to cover in depth how to negotiate on properties and what different negotiation points are, and ultimately how to beef up your offer so that you win the property that you want against the competition without just having to throw more money on the table. It's too detailed for this overview video, but that's going to be coming soon. And ultimately, this stage is where the purchase process does become intense. So just know that it's normal, be ready for it. Don't get intimidated, don't be discouraged. Know that it's completely normal for this to happen. The stakes get high and shit gets real. So just be ready for it. Ultimately, you'll get through it just fine. You'll go back and forth with the seller probably a few times. Sometimes your starting offer is accepted just as is by the seller. That's amazing. Usually the seller will come back with a counter offer of some sort. They might want to increase the asking price, or they might want to minimize some of the other incentives that you asked for. Either way, sellers in their head usually have a bottom line, and what they're doing is they'll likely be calculating the value of all the things that you're asking for and comparing whether they can afford to give it to you. After going back and forth a couple of times, you will have a meeting of the minds. That is the next step of the purchase process, and that's a happy day. When we get a meeting of the minds, that is an accepted offer. That means that the seller is satisfied with the offer that you've come up to. You are satisfied with what the seller has come down to. It's not just the purchase price. It's really the purchase price and all of the terms of the deal. So now you have an accepted offer, which still is not binding. So note that you can still be looking for other properties during this whole process. So maybe it took you a couple of days to align and come to a meeting of the minds. As soon as we get to a meeting of the minds, the buyer provides their real estate attorney's information because the contract is going to be sent out within the next couple of business days. At this time, the seller's agent and the buyer's agent work together to put together what's called the deal sheet. The deal sheet is an electronic document that encompasses all of the terms of the deal. This document is sent from the real estate agents to the seller and buyer's attorneys. This is the only document that the attorneys use to draft the contract. A lot of people think that their real estate attorney is negotiating terms of the deal on their behalf, but that's actually not the case. The real estate attorneys actually do no negotiation regarding terms of the deal. That is all completely left up to the buyer, the seller, and their respective real estate agents. And the attorneys transcribe all of those details into the contract to make sure that it's legally enforceable. Once that deal sheet has been sent out to the attorneys, you now have a period of due diligence and contract finalization, which usually takes 1 to 2 weeks. It's getting so dark in my apartment. I need to set up this ring light contraption. Oh man. Okay, that's a lot better. Wait, hold on, I need to adjust it. Okay. All right, I think that's good. Though it is true that your attorney does not negotiate terms of the deal for you, there are many things that your attorney does negotiate for you in the contract review phase. The contract is usually drafted by the seller's attorney. Most residential real estate contracts in New York are pretty standard to start, but there are obviously a lot of pieces of the contract that are heavily in favor of the seller, such as timing. So for example, they're going to want to rush closing, rush the period of time that you have to get your mortgage, etc. So your buyer's agent is going to go through that contract and buffer in the appropriate period of time for you so that if you do have a hiccup or something that needs to be addressed along the way, you aren't in risk of being in breach of the contract. There are a lot of other things that your buyer's agent will work into the contract to make it protect you. Those things are making sure that whether you have any contingencies of any kind, those are included. They'll add clauses to make sure that all of the appliances are going to be delivered in working order. They'll include remedies for any particular common issues that might arise. We also call this period of time the due diligence process because your buyer's attorney is thoroughly reviewing all of the building documents, the financials, all of the meeting minutes. The attorney typically will go back 5 years and read the history of the board meeting minutes to make sure that they're aware of any policy changes that might be coming down the pipeline, any assessments or issues in the building or things that they needed to collect money for. They really look to make sure that the building is a good, solid investment for you. This contract finalization period will usually take 1 to 2 weeks. If it goes past 2 weeks, usually there's a red flag. It means that one party, whether it be the seller's party or the buyer's party, might be being a little bit too rigid or insisting on things that they're not making headway on getting. And it is very common that if it doesn't seem like a buyer is signing a contract in good faith as quickly as possible, it's very common that a seller will also send a contract to another competing buyer just to make sure that they don't lose their plan B person. If they had more than one offer on the table, they may engage with more than one buyer at once if they feel like you might back out of the deal or whatever the case may be. So you just want to make sure that if you are serious about the deal and if you do really plan to move forward, that you are acting in good faith and that we're communicating to the seller side of any delays that are arising and what the delays are for. As long as everything's reasonable and understandable, there's no problem at all, but we do want to make sure that things are happening within a certain time period so that you don't risk losing the deal if that's not what you're trying to do. Once the contract is in good shape and the buyer's attorney feels that it is appropriate for the purchaser to sign the contract, they will meet with the buyer and walk them through the entire contract and have them sign. At that point, the buyer provides a 10% deposit check that is in the form of a bank certified check, and that check goes towards the purchase price of the apartment, but for now it's held with the seller's attorney in escrow until closing. Once the buyer signs the contract, the attorney will send the contract as well as a 10% down payment check to the seller's attorney, and then the seller will countersign. Once the seller countersigns the contract, you are officially in contract. We have a fully executed contract, all parties are aligned, and this is when you can take a breath of fresh air. Unless something crazy happens, that apartment's yours. You and the seller definitely are relieved once both sides have signed because it does show that everyone's on the same page. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet that does occur during the due diligence period right before contract signing is your inspection if you choose to have one done. Many people in New York, Manhattan, and Brooklyn who are purchasing condos and co-ops, often they will pass on having an inspection done, but there are times when it is important to have an inspection. I'm gonna go through the advice I usually give my clients on when you do wanna have an inspection and when you can probably take a pass. An inspection costs usually on the low side around $300 to $500 for a very, very small apartment, like a small studio, all the way up to a couple of $1,000s for a larger home. Sometimes they can be fairly expensive and people want to know if they're really necessary. The inspection is paid for by the buyer. It is important to know if there are issues within the building or the unit itself, and usually in a condo or a co-op, with respect to the appliances and the condition of the floors and the walls and the ceiling, based on your own naked eye, you can usually see if there are any issues within the four walls of your apartment. In New York City condos and co-op buildings, you are only personally responsible for what exists in the walls of your apartment. Anything outside of the walls of the apartment are technically the building's property and the building's responsibility to fix. However, it is important to remember that as an owner in the building, you are partly financially responsible for repairs that the building needs to make because you are the source of the building's income. If the building cannot cover the cost of the repair that needs to be made using its reserve fund, then it's obviously going to assess the unit owners to cover the cost of the repair. Something that's very important to look at is the building reserve fund. If the reserve fund is not hefty, then there is a risk that if something was to break in the building, whether it's the boiler or if there's a leak in the roof, the building is going to need to assess unit owners probably a significant amount of money to have it fixed. You do want to know if key components of the building are at the end of their life, because that means that there might be an assessment coming up soon. So an inspection is going to tell you that information. If a building is a brand new development, like a brand new ground up development, and therefore there aren't many residents in the building yet, it's not up and running or a well-oiled machine yet, it doesn't have a long track record of whether things work or not, and the reserve fund also hasn't had a chance to really grow and build up yet, then I always say have an inspection done. Have an inspection done in those new development buildings, because you really never know until a building is really up and running for a few years. That's when you'll find out that there aren't any real major issues that you need to look out for. If a building is extremely old, then I always recommend having the inspection. The attorney will tell you about history of maintenance increases and assessments in the building. If the building is known for significant increases in maintenance and they've also passed an assessment or two in the last 5 years, then they probably are looking to either not tap into the reserve fund or the money is not there in the reserve fund. So that is another instance where I would say definitely have the inspection done. If you're dealing with a building that has a lot of units, like a couple of 100 units or a 500 unit building or complex, then if something wrong occurs in the building or if something breaks, oftentimes if there is an assessment to the unit owners, it's usually smaller because the cost is spread over so many owners. So in those cases, I advise that it's probably okay if you don't want to have the inspection done. So if you do decide to have an inspection done, of course it makes sense to do it before you sign the contract, because knowing about an issue really isn't going to do much for you once you've already signed the contract. So you do it before the signing, you do it in tandem while the attorney's doing the due diligence, so it's not causing a delay. And it's very easy to schedule an inspection. Usually an inspector is able to come to an apartment within 48 hours notice. It doesn't delay the process, and you can get the inspection report as soon as the following business day. You would review the inspection report with your attorney. The attorney will really help you call out if there's anything alarming in the inspection report. Very often a seller will agree to make a repair or give you a little bit of money off if something alarming was to come up in the inspection. So assuming that your due diligence process has happened, that your contract was in good shape, and you do sit down with the attorney and sign it, you are in a fully executed contract. The first thing we do with that contract is we send it to your mortgage loan officer, who gets right on the process of sending your file into underwriting along with the contract, and they begin the process to approve you for your loan. Again, I'm going to go into great detail about the loan approval process and exactly what happens when I have a mortgage loan officer on in an upcoming episode. The bank sends an appraiser to the property, and they will assess what their opinion is of the market value of the home. It's very important to note that if you are getting a mortgage, for example, 80% of the property purchase price, the bank is only going to lend you that percentage of their assessed value, not what you've agreed to pay for the apartment. So for example, let's say you were in a situation that was so competitive, if for some reason the appraisals are not coming in at the right price and it just seems like you agreed to pay higher than market value, which is pretty rare, honestly, for that to occur, but it does happen. Ultimately, you end up in a scenario where you either need to go back and renegotiate the price with the seller and see if the seller will come down based on the new information that you have, or you need to pay out of pocket the difference between the price that you are willing to pay for the apartment and the price that the bank assessed the property for. So while the underwriters are reviewing the file, they will look at several factors which help them decide whether they're going to approve your loan or not. The rigidity What am I trying to say? How strictly the bank will hold you to each of these requirements will vary from bank to bank. Once the bank officially approves your loan application, you receive a commitment letter. At that point, there are usually just a few conditions that still need to be met. So you work with your loan officer to provide whatever files they might be asking for, and ultimately then you will receive notice that the bank is clear to close. While the bank is working on getting you approved for your loan, we are in tandem working on the purchase application, which is also known as the sales application. So again, these processes are happening simultaneously. Once you sign your contract, we immediately start working on the sales application. Both condos and co-ops have purchase applications. How tedious they each are does vary from building to building. Your buyer's agent is going to be critical in helping you complete this board application, and then it gets submitted to the building management company for approval. That's one of the steps in the purchase process that's unique in New York, because co-ops and condos are much more popular in New York and Brooklyn than they are anywhere else. And it does require an extensive period of time for review and approval. We hope that within a couple of weeks we hear back from the board, but usually it takes about a month. Ultimately, we hear from them on whether or not you're approved. If you're approved for a condo, we will get a letter from management that states that you're approved, and ultimately all you need to do at that point is start scheduling your closing date so that you can close on the property. If it's a co-op and the co-op board reviews your application and likes what they see, then they will send you a note that says that they would like for you to come in for a formal interview. This is why the purchase process for co-ops tends to be longer than for a condo. We don't know when that interview is going to be until we hear from the board that they would like to call you in. Once you go for your interview and meet the board in person, you usually hear back from the board on whether you are officially approved within 24 hours of the meeting. Usually your closing date is the week right after you hear that you're approved. The final step before closing is the final walkthrough. The final walkthrough is extremely important. You never want to pass up your opportunity to do a final walkthrough. It's your last opportunity to visit the apartment, and you make sure that the apartment is in the same condition as it was in when you signed your contract. It's specifically to make sure that there was no damage done to the apartment and that nothing malfunctioned since you signed your contract to now when you're ready to close. So we go in, we check every single appliance, make sure that the apartment is in appropriate functioning condition. You want to do your walkthrough as close to closing as possible. Finally, it is closing day. This is the day that everyone's been waiting for. You're excited, the seller's excited. What happens at closing is the bank provides the seller with the funds for the purchase price, and that's how the seller gets paid. And there are a ton of documents that both the buyer and the seller sign. Your attorney walks you through every single thing. You'll write a number of checks out. Fees are also reconciled. For example, if you are closing, let's say in the middle of the month, and the seller has already paid their maintenance and property taxes for the month, the attorneys calculate the numbers, and ultimately credits are given to make sure that each party is only paying for the amount of time that they were in possession of that unit. It's funny because as advanced as we've come in technology, closings are still like dinosaur level. It's paper everywhere, being passed from person to person, stacks of paper that are going to the photocopy machine. It's just like, that is how everything is filed and saved. Closings usually take around an hour. That's an average. By the end of it, you get your keys to the apartment, and that's it. You are closed on the apartment. You go home or you go out to dinner and you have some champagne and you celebrate that you now are a property owner. So that was your overview of the property purchase process. I hope that this video was helpful to you. I hope that you enjoyed watching it. Of course, if you have any questions after watching this video, please feel free to email me. My email address is christina.cremidas@element.com. You can also reach out to me on Instagram at any time. I definitely think that if you're interested in these videos and if you'd like to stay up to date, definitely follow me on Instagram. I share a lot of personal updates as far as like everyday life, as well as work updates, real estate updates, market updates. Also, if you don't want to miss my upcoming videos and if you would like to be notified when new videos are released, please subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell icon. That'll make sure that you're notified when I post a new video and you won't miss anything. If you are planning on going through the purchase process for yourself and you do want to be represented by me as your real estate agent, please be sure to reach out to me. I am very accessible and I'm never too busy for new clients. I would love to work with you. And lastly, before I go, I just want to truly express to you how amazing it is that you guys are here right now watching these videos. Times are crazy right now. Things are scary. We're stuck in quarantine. Just the fact that you are here right now is so awesome. You can pat yourself on the back because you are already 10 steps ahead of other people who are paralyzed by fear right now. You're getting this information, you're learning the process, and you're making sure that once you are ready, that you are armed with the knowledge and you know exactly what to do first. Kudos to you. You are so amazing, and I'm so happy that we're here together to do this. And I just can't wait for this community to continue to grow even bigger and to become a huge group of people who are motivating each other to invest in real estate and set themselves up for success in the future. This wraps up episode 5. Please stay tuned for the next video. Thank you so much for watching today. I love you guys so much. I'll see you next week.